Mom forgot to hang up the call. And I heard everything. I had just finished watering the plants when the phone rang. It was Susan. She rarely called, so I answered right away. But instead of her voice greeting me, all I heard was background noise. At first, I thought the call had dropped. I was about to hang up when I recognized her voice. She was talking to someone. My heart skipped a beat when I heard Helen's voice, my sister. She's just holding on out of spite, Susan said, her voice flat and annoyed. Helen chuckled. Well, she can't last forever. Once she's gone, we can finally sell that house. I told you, it's worth more than you think. The land alone. I know, Susan interrupted. I'm just tired of pretending. Every time I visit, I feel like I'm stuck in that old woman's past. That house smells like dust and regrets. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the phone still pressed against my ear. My watering can slowly dripping on the floor. My daughter and my sister, talking about me like I was already dead. Like I was some burden they couldn't wait to get rid of. Helen laughed again. You're doing her a favor by visiting. She should be grateful. I stopped going years ago. She just wants attention. Always did. Susan sighed. She clings to me like I'm all she has. And maybe I am, but I didn't ask for that. My breath caught in my throat. I hung up. Not because I couldn't bear to hear more, but because I'd already heard enough. I sat down, staring at the floor. I must have looked ridiculous, sitting there with soaked slippers and shaking hands. But I couldn't move. Their voices rang in my ears like a song I'd never unhear. The betrayal didn't hit all at once. It came in waves. First disbelief, then anger. But underneath it all, there was a deeper pain. The kind you feel in your bones. The kind that reminds you that you've loved people who never truly saw you. I thought about all the years I'd stood by Susan. When her first marriage fell apart, I was there. When she had Alex and couldn't manage him, I raised that boy like he was my own. And Helen, when her husband left her for that younger woman, who picked up the pieces. Me. I opened my home. My heart. And now they spoke of me like I was a dying plant. Just waiting to be pulled from the ground. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering. How long had they felt this way? How many times had I misread their silences, their fake smiles, their polite hugs? I remembered Susan's last visit. She barely stayed an hour. Said she had errands. Didn't even sit for coffee. And Helen? I hadn't seen her in over a year. I'd always told myself they were busy. That they loved me in their own way. But that phone call told me the truth. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I sat at the kitchen table staring at a half-eaten piece of toast. My thoughts louder than the silence in the house. Everything felt heavier. The walls, the air, even the chair under me. I had heard my daughter and sister plan my absence like it was a business transaction. No tears. No emotion. Just profit and inconvenience. I tried to go about my day as if nothing had happened. But it was impossible. Every corner of the house held a memory. And now each one felt like a lie. The framed photo of Susan at her college graduation. How proud I'd been. The little crocheted hat I made for Alex when he was born. The antique mirror Helen had given me after her divorce, saying I'd always been her anchor. I realized I'd built my life around people who only saw me as useful when I had something to offer. I kept thinking back to when Susan had Alex. She was overwhelmed, lost, and Greg was already walking out the door. She dropped Alex in my lap and disappeared for months. I never questioned it. I loved that boy. Still do. But the older he got, the less she let me see him. Helen was no different. She always showed up when she needed something. Money, a place to stay, someone to cry to. And I was always there. Because that's what family does, right? Except now I was beginning to understand. Love doesn't always come back the way you give it. Later that afternoon I called Susan. I didn't say a word about the call. I just asked if she'd be visiting this weekend. Oh, she said, pausing. Not sure. Alex has soccer, and we're just pretty swamped. Of course, I said quietly. Just thought I'd ask. She didn't even ask how I was. When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. And then I started gathering things. Not packing. Just sorting. Photo albums, documents, recipes, letters. I found a letter my father wrote me before he died. He'd warned me about Helen. Said she had a talent for using people. And that I should never let her make me feel small. I'd forgotten that letter. Or maybe I'd chosen to forget. That night, I pulled out an old box from the top of the closet. It had journals, some old birthday cards, and a few legal documents. I began organizing them methodically with intention, not out of paranoia, but because for the first time in decades, I wasn't sure what I owed anyone anymore. The next morning, Helen called. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have to. I'm glad you've been following along this far. Stay tuned until the end, because I still have more things to reveal. And tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. That weekend, Susan and Helen showed up. No warning. No invitation. Just the sound of their voices outside the front door, and the clinking of car doors shutting. I opened the door slowly, wiping my hands on my apron. Well, this is a surprise. Helen leaned in for a half-hearted hug. We thought we'd stop by. It's been too long. Susan walked past me like she owned the place, not even glancing up. We just figured we should spend some time together. I noticed a large manila folder under Susan's arm. I said nothing, but my stomach twisted. They made small talk in the living room, asking how I was sleeping, how the garden looked lovely as always, commenting on how the curtains hadn't changed in years. Then Susan pulled out the folder. We've been meaning to help you get your affairs in order. Just in case. It's good to be prepared. In case of what? I asked, keeping my tone calm. You're not getting any younger, Mom, she said. We just want to make sure everything's taken care of. It's practical. Helen added. It's peace of mind. For everyone. I took the folder. Inside were documents, power of attorney, property transfer forms, and something resembling a will. All pre-filled. All ready for my signature. I closed the folder and set it on my lap. I appreciate the effort, I said quietly, but I'm not ready to sign anything today. Susan's smile faltered. We're just trying to help. I know, I said. Let's have some tea. I moved to the kitchen, my hands trembling only slightly. I boiled water, set the cups, placed the sugar just how Susan liked it. I watched them through the doorway as they whispered to each other. They stayed just over an hour. When they left, Helen kissed my cheek, and Susan barely looked back. As their car disappeared down the road, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder unopened beside me. The truth was glaring now. This wasn't about care or love. This was about convenience. About what I owned. About making room for their own lives. That evening, I called Deborah, an old friend who'd once offered me a guest room if I ever needed a break. She answered on the second ring. You okay, Mary? I hesitated. I think I'm ready for a change. She didn't ask questions. Come whenever you want. The room's yours. After I hung up, I went into the guest room, Susan's old room, and looked around. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the walls that once held her childhood. It was all so quiet now, and for the first time, I allowed myself to grieve what I thought I had. They hadn't left me. They'd never truly been here. After their visit, the phone stopped ringing. No more check-ins. No more fake concern. Just silence. At first, it unsettled me, but then I started to appreciate it. The absence of their voices gave me room to hear my own thoughts again. I didn't respond to Helen's text the next week. Have you thought more about the documents? Nor did I reply to Susan's email titled, Following Up. Instead, I spent my days clearing out rooms. I gave away clothes that hadn't fit in years, packed up keepsakes that only held weight in memories, and started writing things down. Things I remembered, things I regretted, things I wanted to release. I went out for walks more, sat in the park, bought myself a new mug with little yellow daisies. For no reason other than it made me smile. I spoke to the neighbor's dog when he passed by. I made banana bread and gave it to the mailman. I let the world back in slowly, but only the parts one chose. Then came Susan's second attempt. She showed up alone this time, no warning again. I was on the porch trimming a potted plant. Mom, she called, all cheerful like she hadn't ignored me for weeks. I stood up, brushed off my hands. Didn't expect company. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just wanted to see how you're doing. I let her inside. She glanced around the living room, like she was assessing the furniture. I offered tea. She declined. Then, after a few empty exchanges, she dropped her smile. You're acting strange. Avoiding us. Ignoring the messages. I'm not avoiding. I'm choosing, I said steady. And I've chosen some quiet. She stared at me, her face tightening. This isn't about quiet. This is about you being stubborn. We're trying to help you. No, I said. You're trying to prepare for my absence. But I'm still here. Still living. And I'm not signing away my life just to make yours easier. Susan's mouth opened like she might argue, but she didn't. Instead, she stood up. Fine. I hope you know how difficult you're being. I do, I said. And I'm fine with it. She left without hugging me. That night, I pulled out a suitcase from under my bed. I didn't fill it yet, but I placed it by the door. I needed the reminder. I could go. I had somewhere to go. The silence that followed Susan's visit was different this time. It wasn't heavy. It was clear. And for the first time, it started to speak. It told me I didn't owe anyone anything. It told me I could start over. It told me that the woman I had always been loyal, available, forgiving, was still inside me, but she was tired. And now, she deserved peace. It was a Thursday morning when I made the call. Deborah picked up on the first ring. I'm ready, I told her. She didn't ask questions. Come whenever. I'll put fresh sheets on the bed. I hung up and stared at my living room for a long time. The faded armchair by the window. The quiet hum of the refrigerator. The scent of lavender from the oil diffuser. It was home. But not a safe one anymore. Not one filled with love. Just memories, and too many of them tainted. I packed slowly. Not because I doubted my decision, but because each item I folded was a reminder of a life I had built around people who had already moved on without me. I took only what mattered. Photos of Alex when he was little, a worn cookbook from my mother, a few journals, 2 sweaters I loved, and the letter my father had written. Everything else I left. That afternoon I called a realtor. Yes, I'd like to discuss putting my house on the market. The woman on the other end asked if I had family I needed to coordinate with. No, I said firmly. It's my decision. I didn't tell anyone. Not Susan. Not Helen. I knew if I did, they'd come back with charm and pressure, with guilt wrapped in false concern. I wasn't giving them the chance. The following week, I signed the paperwork. By Friday, the for sale sign was up. I left before the first showing. When Susan came by the house the next Saturday and found it empty, she called me in a panic. 6 missed calls. 3 voicemails. Her voice growing more frantic with each one. Mom, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Call me back. Please. The last one was sharper. You're being incredibly selfish. I listened. And then I deleted every message. Deborah greeted me at the door with open arms. Her home was warm and quiet, with the smell of cinnamon and old wood. Her guest room was small but cozy, the kind of space where you could breathe. We had tea on the porch that evening. She didn't pry, just sat with me while the sun dipped behind the trees. I thought I'd feel guilt, I said after a while. And do you? She asked gently. No, I said. I feel clean. Like I finally washed off years of something I didn't know was covering me. We clinked our mugs together. I smiled. Not wide. Not dramatic. Just soft and steady. It was enough. That night, I slept through until morning. No dreams. No restlessness. Just peace. And in the quiet of a new beginning, I realized. They didn't need to understand why I left. I only needed to know that I did. 2 months passed. The house sold quicker than I expected. A young couple bought it. They were expecting their first child. The realtor said they loved the big yard and could already picture a swing hanging from the tree out back. That made me smile. Susan found out about the sale through the listing. She sent a furious string of messages, accusing me of betrayal, of abandoning the family. She demanded to know where I was, told me Helen was worried sick, that I was being cruel. I didn't reply. Because by then, I understood something simple and devastating. They weren't mourning my absence. They were mourning the loss of control. The loss of something they assumed would always be theirs. I had given too much of myself over the years. My time, my energy, my loyalty. And in return, I was kept around out of obligation. Spoken of in whispers like an inconvenience. Handled like a package waiting to be delivered somewhere out of sight. I used to think silence was a punishment. Now I see it as protection. Life with Deborah was quiet in the best way. We cooked together, sat on the porch, watched old movies. I started journaling daily. Some days were emotional, filled with grief I hadn't let myself feel before. Other days, I was simply content to sit in the sun with a cup of coffee and not be needed. Alex wrote me a letter, handwritten, said he missed me, that his mom was always too busy, but he never forgot how I used to make him toast with cinnamon sugar. He remembered the bedtime stories, the warm socks I used to knit. He asked if he could visit someday. I cried when I read it. I wrote back, told him he could visit anytime, that I'd saved a few of his old drawings, that I never stopped thinking about him. One morning, a letter arrived from Susan. No envelope, just a single sheet folded sloppily. It said, "I hope you're happy. You ruined everything." I didn't read it twice. I placed it in the trash without a second thought. Because she was wrong. I hadn't ruined anything. I had finally stopped pretending. I had stopped waiting to be loved the way I deserved. I had taken back the little life I had left, and decided it was mine alone to live. That winter, I planted tulip bulbs outside Deborah's kitchen window. She laughed and said they might not bloom. But they did. Soft pink and yellow ones. Stronger than we expected. I stood by them one morning, coffee in hand, and thought to myself, this is enough. I don't need apologies. I don't need explanations. I don't need them to understand. Because the door is closed. And for once, it's not locked from the outside. It's closed because I chose peace. And I'm not opening it again.